Hello, ladies and gentlemen, theys and thems. Today we're going to be learning subnetting math, and I'm going into this hoping you already know a little bit of subnetting math, because if you don't, you're going to have a long and hard time with this video. Pause. Alright, so I got a PowerPoint. We're going to look at the PowerPoint. This is cool. I can also doodle. I have the little this thing. That's awesome. We're going to get into it. We're going to go through the simple stuff really fast, and I'm going to get you 3 examples. All right, binary. 2 options, true, false, yes, no. A plus certified child, actually cool child. We know what my parents got. What is an IP address? Well, we have this funny little comic, 192.168.10.2. Is that who you are? And then the other person says, what the hell does that mean? This is stupid. I audibly laughed when I made this. And I'm sorry that y'all think that it's not funny. It's really funny. Anyways, an IP address is a 32-bit number that specifies a network and a specific device on that network. What is a subnet mask? Well, a subnet mask is basically a 32-bit true or false question that's asking, is this number the network portion of the IP address? And here I've given you some examples. Here we have the subnet mask on top and the IP address on the bottom. You'll notice a few things about the subnet mask here. If it's a 1, it's blue, and if it's a 0, it's red. 1 is basically saying true, yes, this is the network portion, and 0 is saying this is not the network portion, this is the host portion. Now, down here we have the IP address. We can know that all of these numbers here are going to be the network. So also over here, all of these numbers are the network. We have it written in binary on the left, decimal on the right. The red is basically the host or the device number. So it wouldn't be wrong to say that this IP address here is saying this is device number 2 on network 192.168.10. I hope you already know that. Okay, more examples to really bang that into your head. Pause. Here's a few subnet masks that also work. This subnet mask here only has 5 ones, and it doesn't fill out its full octet, which an octet is 8 bits separated by a period, and it has a bunch of zeros. And this one is 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29 ones, which makes this in decimal, which is cute. But this also doesn't fill out the full octet. But that's because there's basically only 2 rules with subnet masks. The ones must be consecutive. If they're broken by a 0, every digit after has to be a 0. You can't have 101 in a subnet mask. It has to be 100, 110, or 1111. The less important rule that you're going to see a lot less, because at almost no point in your network plus are they going to ask you questions about subnet masks this small, but there has to be at least 2 addresses on a subnet mask. So you have to have at least 254 as your last number. You have to at least have a 1 here. I'm not 100% confident on that. It could also be a 1 here. I would need someone who knows a little bit more about this than me. I'm learning the test too. This is how I've decided to do this. I'm kind of going a John Hammond approach, except I'm not John Hammond. Anyways, this here is not a valid subnet mask because it's got zeros followed by ones. The zeros have to be on the right, the ones have to be on the left, the ones have to be consecutive, so do the zeros. So they're being broken every other digit, so not valid, evil. Let's keep going. How the binary reads for normal people. Uh, Binary kind of goes by places, and I took this almost directly from Professor Messer, by the way. So if you're trying to learn subnetting and you're starting here, leave. I'm going to actually link Professor Messer and his subnetting videos. I'm going to start with the first subnetting video because his videos are much better than mine. They go much more in depth on the easy stuff, and I'm not. This is how this works. You count like this. If you fill out all 8 of these, you get 255 because we start with 0, not 256. Now, the main parts that you need to remember are the trailing ones, which we'll get into on the next slide, because you need to know 1 here, 1 here, that's 192. If you add another 1, that's 224. Add another 1, that's 240. You add another 1, that's 248. You need to know that. You need to be able to throw that off the dome. Let's keep going. Self-proclaimed doctor. Since we love binary so much, why do we even write our submasks in decimal? Well, that's because I hate you. And also because the math. For 99% of non-test cases, you're going to be using CIDR notation, and CIDR just counts the number of ones in the subnet masks, in binary, and slaps it at the end of the IP address. So that's even easier to read. Here's a quick example, binary subnet mask with 8 ones. 8 ones means a CIDR notation of 8, which is cool, because there are 8 ones. Now here's the IP address that would be associated with this. This is network number 192 and computer number 168.10.4. Now, we're going to learn how to do 6 to 7 second subnetting. This is my stupid Gen Z trail off from Professor Messer's 7-second subnetting. I just thought it was really funny. So here's the chart, copied directly from Professor Messer, my goat, and this is the chart you need to memorize. This chart is scary. Pause, screenshot, because you're going to need to look at this chart a lot over your Network Plus studying period. And you need to know this chart as best you can. And if you really need to, memorize how to write the chart. But you have to memorize it or you have to learn how to write it. But if you memorize it, you can get that 6 to 7 second efficiency, which I don't know if that's even possible, but hey, professionals do it, so it clearly is. Anyways, get good at writing it down or learn to memorize it. I'm going to teach you how to memorize it. So, we're going to figure out your CIDR to decimal. CIDR is really simple when you look at it. So these highlighted numbers here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. You can count to 8. You're not dumb. And then also this bottom row here is highlighted because we have 8, 16, 24, 32. You have to know your 8, 16, 24, 32, your multiples of 8. How can we figure out these without memorizing all of the numbers? Well, we're going to reference these. We're going to reference 8, 16, 24, 32. And to do that, we're going to use the 8s, the multiples of 8, to reference these highlighted numbers, the really easy to remember numbers, because you can count to 8. And basically what I want you to do is I want you to know that CIDR 1 gets you to 128, CIDR 5 gets you to 248, CIDR 7 gets you to 254. And everything I'm about to teach you is just how to get from any one of these numbers to the number next to it. So if you get CIDR 20, I want to teach you how to get CIDR 4 as quickly as possible. If you get CIDR 14, I want you to be able to go CIDR 6. And since you already know CIDR 6 is equal to 252, you get that number real fast. But patterns. The number 8 is going to be your best friend. You're going to need to get really familiar with the number 8. That's your baby doll, I say, because I'm a gangster. Unfortunately, you will have to memorize the decimal column. This column will have to get memorized. I know that sucks, and I know you don't want to hear that. But you're going to have to remember 128, 192, 224, 240, 248, 252, 254, 255. You're going to have to memorize that for the test. But luckily, it's only 8 numbers. And 8 numbers is way easier to memorize than more than 8 numbers. Little mind thought for you, little brain. Anyways, here's how to memorize this table. So I messed up my animations. Sorry. But if we get a number like 21, we have to, and we don't have the chart, The chart is here to prove me right, but ideally, we just don't even want to look at the chart. But this is how we're going to do the math when we don't have the chart in front of us. Say we get a number like 21. We must first use the previous multiple of 8. This is the first method. You have to get to the previous multiple of 8, which is 16, because 24 is the next multiple of 8 after 21. But for this first method, we're just going to go straight back because you don't have to do any thinking. You can count on your fingers. So 21, previous multiple is 16. If you remember your 8s and you remember your decimals, you can easily figure out all of the CIDR translations. So we're going to call this the last multiple of 8 method because you use the last multiple of 8. So using this trick, very simple. You go 21, which is the number that you got given, and you know that 16 is your previous multiple of 8. You literally sit there and you go 17, 18, 19, 20, 21. Look at that, 21. And look at the number on my hand, 5. That's your CIDR. And since you know in a perfect world that CIDR 5 is equal to 248, you can just go straight over. Beautiful. Now, this is a bit slow if the number is more than 5 than the previous multiple of 8, because if we started, like, I don't know, let's say our number was 23, why would you go all the way back to 16 and then count up to 7 to get to 23? You can just count backwards, which gets us into the next method, the number line method. A very fun method. I like the number line method, but it's a little bit hard to explain. But practice it. If you can practice it and you can do it twice, you can probably get it really framed into your brain, and then it should be really easy from there on. So we're gonna do the number line method. Now we think of the numbers kind of like a number line. I messed up. I had to make a an iteration change. Holy cow. I had to make an iteration change, but anyways. Based solely off the fact that we only deal in multiples of 8. So it's always in numbers of 8. So we're basically going to mentally assign a number. What the heck? We're going to mentally assign a number to every single one of these. And we just have to know that 8 sits on top of our multiples of 8. So 8 sits on top of 8, 8 sits on top of 16, 8 sits on top of 24. And every time you hit a multiple of 8, it resets back to 1. And this is how I think of it. Of course, you can just do the math if you're that kind of person, but here's how I think of it. I think of it with the numbers on top, and I go, well, I get given 21, and then I know, because I can think for a second, I know that 24 is very close to 21. So I'm just going to sit here and go 8. I'm going to count backwards from 24. I'm going to go 8, 7, 6, 5. We can walk back three notches from 8, and then we get to 21, which is the number that we started with, which is where we want to be. And since we know that 24 is an 8, and 8 minus 3 is 5, we know the cider is 5. You can also literally sit there and go 24, 23, 22, 21, 3. What's 3 minus 8? It's 5. Our cider is 5. That's how I think of it. This is my favorite method. If you can mentally just tear all of everything I just said down and do it some other way that works better for you, do that. This is how I memorize this table really quickly. Now, this method is way faster. Just practice it. Now, we're going to get into the examples, kind of. Step 2, you got to figure out your addresses, and you're going to count by your addresses. Meaning you're going to count by multiples of your address whenever you figure out what your address is, which will be really easy because you know your cider notation. Now, this means if we get 4 in our address, we're going to count by 4s, and that's gross because we can go all the way up to 255, but we'll get into that. Now, you're going to start dropping things down using the beautiful rules. Of course, you could also do this before step 2, but I kind of like the way that I do it because to me it just kind of, you do all of the fun steps all at once really quickly. And so this is step 3 to me. But while I was writing this, I realized that nothing really changes if you do step 2 second or if you do step 2 third. Anyways, if a number is 255 in the subnet mask, that means on the IP address, just copy it straight down. It is a network number, therefore it's not going to change. If your subnet mask says 255, that means everything in this octet is set, it is the network, it's good, it's not changing. If a number is 0, you just copy the 0, as it could literally be anything from 0 to 255. A 0 in a subnet mask literally means it could be anything. So 0, just do 0 on the IP address because you're trying to find your first number. Now, if you're trying to find the broadcast, you want to set it to 255, but we'll get to that. Example 1. If you're given the IP address 192.168.10.154, CIDR 26, find the IP range, the default gateway, and the broadcast address. And that's scary. You see that and you're freaking out. I'm freaking out, and I'm the one who wrote this example question. That's scary. That's a lot of numbers, and it's asking a lot of me. And when people ask a lot of me, I get really scared and I start crying. But luckily I wrote this, so I'm a little bit more prepared than y'all are. So if you're crying, please stop. We're gonna break it down part by part into my little 3-step plan, which I stole from Professor Messer. Okay, we're gonna have to get rid of me so you can read that. So we're gonna convert CIDR to decimal or vice versa. In this case, we're converting it to decimal because we have CIDR 26 on our IP address. Luckily, with the chart sitting here, we know that CIDR 26, we know what it is in decimal. But it's nice to know that off the dome. You know, do your stuff, walk it back 2, and if you're walking it back 2, you're just going to know that that always converts back. You're going to do your math in your head, and you're going to know. But we know what it is. We have the chart. It's right here. It's 2. Walk it back 2 to 24. And look at that. It's 2. Beautiful. I know. All right. Get the number of addresses and count by that number until you hit the range of your mystery number. Now, I realized since this is the 4th number on its little CIDR cheat, we know it's going to be in the 4th octet. But if you really want to think about it, you can go back to your powers of 8. If you don't want to think about it at all, go back to your powers of 8. You know that 26 is more than 24, and if you just know 8, 16, 24, 32, you know that 24 is your 3rd number. And since it's bigger than your third number, it's going to be in the fourth octet. Anyways, so we're going to get the number of addresses and we're going to count by that until we hit the range of our mission number. And since we know our range of addresses is 64, we can just, so we know our CIDR, we can just skip all this and go boop, point that right there. 64, we're going to count by 64s. So on the test, we should, in this case, literally go 0, 64, 128, 192. Because that's these numbers. That's counting by 64. And since we're trying to find the range of 64 multiples that has the number 154, we know that 128 and 192, since 154 falls between those two numbers, we now know that's it. We know all of the things that we need. So let's write them out. Since we know that CIDR 26 makes this subnet mask, that's what SM stands for, subnet mask. It's 255.255.255.192. Since we know that, we can do our fun math. This is our IP address. I genuinely just copied this straight from the question. Nothing has changed yet. So we're going to try to find our default gateway or our router or the first possible address in this IP range. And since we know the IP range, it's 128 to 192. We know that 154 is our funny number, and that 255 is our subnet mask. So we can just copy down all of this directly. Just straight copy it down. I'm doing this because I know how it is. We're just going to copy it straight on down. Look at that, 192, 168, 10. But we're going to use the first number in our range, and we get 128. That's the only number that changes because we only have one number that changes on our subnet mask, and it's the last one, the one that isn't 255. So that's going to be our default gateway or our router. This is our BC or broadcast, which is the last number in the range, minus 1. If we come over here in our range right here, this is our last number, minus 1. It's minus 1 because if it's not minus 1, then our counts of 64 just don't fit in their range. So we have to shave off because it starts a new range every time we get to a multiple of 64. Anyways, you take off 1. Just remember that for your broadcast. All right, we're going to go to our second example. This one's going to be a little bit harder, and it's on purpose. I made it harder because this is an edge case that doesn't get covered in other videos. So if we're given the IP address range, the IP address 10.123.39.234, .234, CIDR 14, we can find the IP range, we can find the default gateway, we can find the broadcast address. Now, this stuff is not hard. This first part isn't. So, I'm not even going to look at my little chart because I know my CIDR notations, Buster, Buckaroo, Buddy, and Pal. We know that CIDR 14 is 2 less than 16, which makes it 6 CIDR. And I know off the top of my head that 6 CIDR is also 64. Or not 64. That's the networks. I looked at the chart. Anyways, 252 in decimal. So that will help us find our subnet mask, or I guess that tells us our subnet. CIDR 14 tells us our subnet mask. But, we can be cool and awesome and just know off the dome that 14 is 252 down here. 252. Now, we're going to convert our CIDR to decimal. It's 252, and we know it's in the second octet, as it is 14 is less than 16, and 14 is more than 8. 8, by the way, first number in 8, 16, 24, 32, because 8 is the first number, and it's bigger than 8, but it's less than the second number, which is 16, we know that it's going to be in right here, the second octet. Because this is our 8 octet, this is our 16 octet, this is our 24 octet, and this is our 32 octet. Now, we're going to get the number of addresses. Oh my goodness, what am I doing? What the heck? Alright, I don't know why that was happening. get the number of addresses and count by that number until you hit the range of the mystery number, which is 123, as we've highlighted aggressively right here. Now, on the test, we could literally go 4, 8, 12, 16, 20, 24, and just keep going. We could just keep doing that until we hit a number around 123. But that's really difficult, and we know how to do math. We can just do math. And we're not going to do anything complicated. We're just going to sit here and honestly, if we're on a test, we can seriously just go, oh, well, 4 times 10, that's 40. And look at that, we've covered so much more ground than if we had just counted and done this 10 times. But we're going to just calculate close enough to 123 and get there after. We can start counting by 4 once we get to something we know is divisible by 4. We just need the range divisible by 4. So, since we know, in this case, 4 times 30 is 120, which, hey, 123, 120, those are some pretty close numbers. This is a good starting point where we can go up by 4s to get 124, and goodness gracious, in that so simple step, we already have the range. It's 120 to 124. There it is. That's it. That's our range. And since we know CIDR 14 is this subnet mask 255.252.0.0, and we know this is our IP address stolen directly from right here, we can find our default gateway and just 120. We just copy down our 255, it's 10, and then we change it to the first number in our range, which is 120. And since these are 0, we just copy the zeros straight down. If it's a 0 in the subnet mask, it's a 0 in our default gateway. It's a 0 in our, or actually in a broadcast, it's a 255. So we'll get into that. Our broadcast, once again, 255, you just copy it on down. And since 252 is not 255 and it's not 0, we just copy the end of our range for our broadcast address. And oh my goodness gracious, I made a mistake on the PowerPoint. This should be 255 and this should be 255. Anyways, I am so sorry. This was unfortunate. How could I do that? That is so unprofessional. Anyways, I'm back for a second, only to disappear again once step 1 happens. But we're going to do something a little bit different, basically the same thing, use the same process. Slightly different question. Given the IP address 203.0.113.142 and the subnet mask 255.255.255.224, find the broadcast address. Look at that. We don't even have to do anything extra. We don't have to do all of this default gateway stuff. It's actually the exact same thing and the same level of difficulty. Now, we're going to already get rid of me. Convert CIDR to decimal or vice versa. And since we have decimal, we could convert to CIDR. We don't really have to, but if you somehow have done what I have done with my highlighting and my explanations previously, and you've associated your first digit CIDRs with all of the other numbers on your spreadsheet here, then it's probably better to go to CIDR, but you don't have to. But since we just know that 224 is 3 CIDR, I guess, you don't really need to know that. But since we know that 224 does, however, have 32 addresses per block, we can just keep going. Now, we're going to get the number of addresses. We're going to count by that number until you hit the range of your mystery number. Oh, and of course, since this is actually much easier in decimal, we know that this number isn't 255 and it's not 0, so we know that these two numbers, this is going to be our funny number that we're messing with. Now, on the test, we could literally go 0, then 32, then 64, then 96, then 128, then 160, because we're counting by 32, as this step says to do so. Get the number, count by that number. We can literally count by 32s and get our range, which is 128 to 60. We could also do the math. I don't know if you're into the math. But with 32, it's honestly easier to count. Even if it's up there into like the 255s, it doesn't take very long to sit there and count it out. But it's up to you once you get into those funnier numbers. But since 142 falls between 128 and 160, we now know everything we need. And we can just do some really simple math. We don't even have to do any conversions. Since the subnet mask is already given to us, literally stolen from right here. And the IP address, which we already know, right there, we can just skip the default gateway, strike it through, and we can just go, well, 255, we're just going to copy that down. This is going to be 203. Actually, I'm going to do this down here. This is going to be 203. Oh, 255 again. We know it's going to be 0. 255 again. Goodness gracious. So we know it's going to be 113 because we're just copying it down. 224. Ugh, gross, disgusting. That's not 255 and that's not 0. But we know our range and we know it's going to be 159. It's going to be 159 because when we do our broadcast address, we do 160, our end of our range, minus 1. Note, the broadcast address is always 1 less than the range because if not, the numbers won't fit within 256, which is their block size. Thank y'all. Please leave feedback if I got anything technically wrong. I am new to this. I know it sounds like the Dreamy Bowl video, but I'm new to this. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm a goofball. And I did this to learn. This video is probably really long. I hope maybe you learned something too. Maybe you enjoyed watching this. Maybe you didn't. Alright. That's it for me. Thank y'all. Thank theys and thems. Thanks the ladies. And thanks the gentlemen. See y'all. Bye.